Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now, this is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of some of the week's top stories. I'm Peter Ndoro, and this is what's coming up on the show today. We'll be asking, in the wake of an increasing trend, should media houses and journalists accept financial assistance from donors abroad in the name of media development? And we asked the question, does this pose a threat to journalism? In focus again, the dissemination of false information on the internet with a new trend known as deep fakes. Now, this is where video is now being manipulated to make people look like they are doing or saying things that they are not. For example, I might not actually even be here. Who knows? And digital radio, well, that's making its way through to the prison system. All right, that's what's coming up on the show. But please remember that you can be a part of the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is at SA Media Monitor, and you can also post using hashtag SABC Media Monitor. But let's begin, though, with a look at what's on the front pages of the Sunday papers. Right, let's start with the Sunday Times, which is leading with a story pointing to what they believe were a series of blunders in the way the public protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane came to the conclusions that she did in her SARS rogue unit findings against Pravin Gordhan. Apparently, amongst other things, she cites an unemployed Rastafarian called Keletso Manyike as being a source and a former SARS specialist agent. But he says he's mystified by this claim and believes that she must be confused. Interesting. The City Press, well, that features a story about an alleged 100 million rand arts funding scandal, where it's believed that the Department of Arts and Culture's Mzansi Golden Economy Fund saw millions being allocated to artists without checks and balances, including, listen to this, Ladysmith Black Mambazo being given 36 million rand over 3 years to teach traditional Zulu song and dance and to make an album with former President Jacob Zuma. 36 million rand. And then the Sunday Independent also leads with the SARS rogue unit, but their focus is that of an editor of the City Press who they're reporting tried to facilitate a secret meeting between advocate Moses Kakane and the then SARS Deputy Commissioner Ivan Pillay to allegedly force or lobby him to alter his damning report into the rogue unit. The Sunday Tribune is reporting a really strange story here about a woman in KwaZulu-Natal who's traumatized having found out that one of her doctors removed one of her ovaries without consent during a surgical procedure. Well, she's suing now for 4.5 million rand for pain and damages. And the Weekend Argus says top story is that of a 70,000 rand award being offered by the Western Cape Police for information regarding 6 men believed to have killed 6 young women aged between 18 and 26 in Cape Town last week. All right, so there's so much to get through on the show, and helping us make sense of these stories are my guest editors. And today we welcome the newly elected Vice President of the Public Relations Institute of Southern Africa, familiar face on the show, Tebogo Ditshego. Thanks very much indeed. Welcome and congratulations.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
So must we bow now and say, Mr. Vice President?
I think I should bow to you. I should be serving you.
And also, for a change, we've got someone in our Durban studios, and we have the editor, guest editor there behind the news network, Joe Mhlanga. Joe, thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to the program, Mnumzane.
Thank you.
Oh, great, fantastic. So those are our guest editors. But our first story now takes a look at what seems to be a growing trend in the media on the continent, with media outlets and journalists getting donor funding from countries abroad. A 2018 report by the American Center for International Media Assistance says that this media development assistance is about $600 million a year. But it's actually likely to be much, much more because the amounts that China donates is not really known. So it could be well over $1 billion dollars. So does this help for the media come at a cost? Let's find out from Professor Audrey Gadzepo, who is with the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Ghana. But she joins us on the line now from the United Kingdom, I believe. She's at Oxford. So let's join her now. Prof. Audrey, thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me on the program, and good morning to everybody.
All right, so when you were looking at these issues of donor funding, what was your concern? What raised your sort of eyebrows that, you know, because some people would say it's a good thing to get funding to develop media on the continent?
Yeah, we were interested in finding out the impact, the relationship between donor funding and journalism practice. How was donor funding impacting on the work of journalists around the continent? Because, you know, historically, journalists have had funding, but there's a greater need for funding of journalism, particularly in these times, for two reasons. When a lot of African countries democratized, there was a feeling from particularly Western countries to support the democratic process by assisting in strengthening journalism on the continent. But then we also do know that these days there are new entrants, for example, China, interested in influencing the continent. And therefore there's a lot of support for all kinds of initiatives, including support to the media. So we wanted to know how that affected the output.
And what did you find? Is the output being affected by this money flow?
Well, it's not so clear to us. My colleague Herman Wasserman earlier did a study to find out if there were any influences with Chinese donor money in journalism, and he couldn't really find the evidence. They couldn't really find the evidence in that research. But our point is that we need to look a little bit more. In the work that we did have research showing journalists' concerns about when they go for training programs in different countries, how they feel constrained about the kinds of things that they report on. So we feel there is some influence, but it's not concretely established yet. But we need to continue to look. We need to continue to ask those questions. For example, in Ethiopia, for example, there was research that showed that when the support for journalism using the Western model of journalism, it doesn't quite work for them. What happens in authoritarian countries when the model of teaching journalism is one of from the north, where it's a liberal democratic model in which the media operates, and yet in our countries that's not necessarily the environment in which some media operate. So
did you find
it becomes impractical?
Yeah. Did you find that there's a difference in approach between the West and the East in terms of the way that they donate and perhaps the way that they interact with journalists on the continent and media houses on the continent?
Well, the East representing China, for example, we know China is supporting journalists and coming on tours, just like in Western countries. They've historically done that. So that's not much of a difference in approach, except that China believes in their journalism model in what they call constructive journalism, not very critical, as opposed to the watchdog kind of journalism that is encouraged in the North, you know. And so when journalists go on these training programs or when they're supported, there's an expectation of practicing journalism perhaps a little bit differently. The watchdog model, which is the expectation in Western countries versus in China, where you're expected to be, in quotes, much more constructive in your journalism and not see the state as adversarial necessarily.
All right, so you're saying that there's no such thing as a free lunch, that none of this is being done purely on a philanthropic basis just to help Africa, and because some of our brothers and sisters are very challenged in terms of resources.
Yeah, and what we think people ought to bear in mind is that no matter the motive, whether it's philanthropic or it's character as philanthropic, there's likely to be an impact in the way journalism is practiced. So if you're training modules in education because support has been given to journalism education from people from the North, they're going to pass on that model of journalism to their students, and it's going to impact on how they do their work. The same for the East. And so there are impacts that we ought to be looking at. We can't just presume that because this is supposed to be philanthropic, it's not going to affect the final outcome. I think that there's going to likely be a continuation of funding of all kinds to support journalism on the continent because people are struggling. Newspapers are struggling to survive in the face of digital media, and the whole question of sustainability is even more important today than in the past. How do we fund journalism? What model should we use? It's clear that a lot of that funding will still be coming from donors from the North and from the East, and how do we ensure journalistic independence in that kind of situation?
All right, so we're running out of time, but perhaps finally, what would be the ideal model for you? Could this be money being donated to a central fund in each country, and then each country then hands out the money to media houses? Or how else could we do it so that there is this perhaps a wall between the person donating the money and the one receiving it?
Well, it's very difficult to determine the kind of model that works. It depends on the media house, it depends on the country. We've seen models where foundations, for example, the Belinda and Bill Gates Foundation, supporting journalism, health journalism in a South African newspaper, for example. Those models seem to be working because they are allowing the journalists to do a lot more than they would, more investigative pieces, much more impactful and analytical pieces than they otherwise would. But I don't think we're going to stop seeing states, countries, directly trying to influence journalism through soft sort of approaches, study tours, support for training programs, and that sort of thing. I think the most important thing is for journalists themselves to recognize that there's a danger that they could be compromised and to discuss amongst themselves how they can best secure their independence.
All right, so Prof. Audrey Gadzepo, thank you so much indeed for joining us on the line. She's with the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Ghana, but she joined us on the line from Oxford University in the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much for having me on.
All right, fantastic. It was lovely chatting to her. All right, let's get a take from my guest editors. Let me start with you, Tebogo. So, donor funding. I mean, genuinely, I've seen across the continent, I've traveled to a few countries, and, we're quite spoiled here in South Africa. We have resources, even though even that is getting constrained. Some of these publications cannot survive without help. and they tell important stories.
Yeah, so publications definitely do need funding, which means that journalism needs to be seen as a business also, because you cannot travel and go to the field if you don't have resources. And that's why you will find a lot of the stories that are now being reported come straight from social media, or they come from a media release. You won't find a lot of times journalists traveling to go and find the story, which is a problem, because journalism and journalists are the watchdog of society. And as the watchdog, they also must be independent.
Yeah.
So that is where the problem comes with donor funding, where you don't know whose interests are being served. And so it is in our best interest, for the media to be well funded, so that they can go about their work independently.
Yeah. Joe, I wonder what your thoughts are, because there are different kinds of funding that I see often. Sometimes we call it sponsored programs, and particularly news ones. It becomes a bit of a concern where a company will say, we want to feature let's say the government, we want to feature our province, we'll pay for your reporters, we'll pay for your accommodation and travel, we want you to do stories about our province. So it's guised as news, but we're starting to cross the line, aren't we?
Peter, you are right. There's no such thing as a free lunch. In most cases, those who are funding the journalism, there's always an agenda. And it is well known that this is one industry where it takes a lot. We travel, we need to find sources, we need to find stories. So there is a compromise that comes from that aspect, that because it's known that there is a lack of resources, there is a lack of funding. As a result now, we're getting interest from the Western world, from China, from all different parts of the world, people wanting to come and fund. As a result, that kind of funding comes with there's always something, there's always an agenda, there's always a narrative that needs to be driven by those people that are funding. As a result, we're not going to get the real organic news that we should be getting, because now, obviously, you'll have to lean more on the side of the funders. So it is a problem in Africa. Once money comes from a different direction, some people have admitted that when they fund, they want something in return. So would we be in a position of compromising the truth, trying to please the person that funded? That is a problem.
So what's the answer then, Joe? What do we do? How do we fund but stay independent?
It is difficult. You suggested earlier that maybe the thing is, you said maybe there could be a funding that will go into one hub that will find all the houses. But will there be a transparency as far as that is concerned? So that it is a problem. We do need the funding, but it needs to be regulated at some point. Maybe government has to come up with, but again, the government will now have hands there. So we're not going to be able to be real watchdogs, because now everything will be controlled. It is a difficult situation. Hence now it looks like it's a free-for-all kind of, since it's not regulated, and it's easier for the people outside to come in. So the answer is it's tough, Peter.
Difficult.
Hence we see the kind of situation that we're seeing today. Hence you see even the kind of headlines that we see in the papers. It's different. You can see that there is an influence coming from different directions, different journalists reporting different things, probably to please the funders or whatever the case is. But we are in trouble.
Teboho, is there an answer? I mean, because clearly the funding is essential. But how do we bring it into the system so that the integrity of journalism is kept? I mean, the philanthropists are donating money to all sorts of causes, arts, universities, and they seem to be fine. What is it about the media?
Well, the problem is that it could also compromise our society. If I'm in South Africa and I go and find an organization that's in Kenya or in Britain, what are my agendas? What is going to be in it for me? So I think that it should be regulated, as the guest has said. It has to be regulated very strictly. We want to move away from a situation where our media is being donated, it's getting money for free, from another country, well, for free in inverted commas. I think that those donors should rather just advertise if they want to put their names out there, and if they want to support that publication. Yeah. Why don't you advertise? Why do you have to hand over money for free?
Yeah, but that advertising is another whole conversation, because if 50% of your revenue is from one advertiser, you're not going to write a negative story about them.
That's true.
It's another kind of chain, I guess, that's possibly there.
Absolutely.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to move on to another story. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll start focusing on something called deep fakes. What do you think that might be? It's real, it's happening, and it's scary. Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, the rise of digitally forged videos, better known as deepfakes, is raising concerns over how this kind of technology could be used to spread misinformation and damage reputations. In a video that surfaced about a month ago, Mark Zuckerberg blankly stares into the camera for what appears to be an office giving a worrying speech about the power the social network gets from collecting user data.
Imagine this for a second. One man with total control of billions of people's stolen data, all their secrets, their lives, their futures. I owe it all to Spectre. Spectre showed me that whoever controls the data controls the future.
Well, so for more on this story, I'm now joined via Skype by Tefo Mohapi, who's the director at iAfrican Media and Publishing First. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Deep fakes, this is something that I had never heard of before this week. I always thought that fake news was more related to print that we see on social media. Tell us about deep fakes. What is it that people are able to do?
Yeah, I think deepfakes is a phenomenon that started about just over a year ago, 2 years ago, where people are using machine learning and artificial intelligence to create images or fake images and fake videos of people, or most of the time, the well-known politicians. And this involves a machine learning technique known as deep learning, where they go about learning or teaching the software how to create human faces. And over time, it perfects the skill of learning how to create human faces and is able to mimic their voices and their movements.
All right, so then essentially it looks like Peter Ndoro, said something. Meanwhile, it's a completely computer-generated image and voice.
Correct. I mean, we've seen images, I think, of Barack Obama. You get all sorts of celebrities like Nicolas Cage. And I think just recently, last week, a movie replaced a certain actor with the face of Jim Carrey to make it look like he was acting in it.
All right. So what are the telltale signs? Because we're already struggling with print in terms of fake news. What are there signs that can say, you know what, I suspect this video has been doctored?
It's a bit difficult because, as I said, it uses a technique called deep learning, so it becomes, over time, it gets a bit better. But there are, if you pay attention to the videos themselves or the images, especially the videos, you can see certain movements are not natural. So you need to really pay attention. And the other...
All right, so it looks like we've got a bad connection with Tefo. Whilst we try and fix that, he mentioned Barack Obama in that answer just a short while ago. Let's see for ourselves this doctored, this deep fake of Barack Obama. Let's just get a sense of this, and we apologize in advance for some of the language that might come through.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan.
It's okay, we're going to leave it there. Again, apologies for that profanity there, but I think it gives you an idea. Tefo, I don't know if you're still there and you can hear us loud and clear.
I can hear you.
Yes, all right. So we played that clip of Barack Obama, and I've got to say, the voice was a little bit off, but if you don't know him 100%, then you might believe that it is him. And then there were slight lip sync issues, but I guess you can also get taken by the message to start questioning whether it's real or not. All right, okay. We're going to take a break and try and get back to Tefo, because this is an important conversation and one we should be concerned about, because it's no longer just what you read that could be problematic, it's but what you see and hear as well. Stay with us. You're still watching Media Monitor. Right, welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and we were talking to Tefo Mohapi just before the break about deep fakes. Now, this is all about video manipulation, where people are now able to manipulate video so that it looks as if it's me talking and it's me saying stuff, but actually it's not even me. So this is really a game changer in terms of fake news. Before it was mostly print, online stuff, but now even video that you see and hear probably or could be a fake at times, so one needs to be careful. Let's chat to our guest editors about this issue. Let me start with you, Joe, in Durban. Fake news, disinformation is a real problem, and most people only believe it when they see a video clip of a person saying that which is said. So I might tweet, Joe Mhlanga said this, only if I see a video clip of you saying it will I believe it. Now, that could be fake. What could this do to journalism?
It is damaging. It is damaging. Look, we are happy for the fact that we have technology, and it's exciting, but we have seen that kind of technology being used by military intelligence, by other intelligent agencies, whereby they will come to a person that said, no, this person has already confessed, and then they show you the video. And then they were able to use that during, in the war zones, especially the Western countries that are involved in these highly technological things. But as far as the media is concerned, such videos could be very dangerous, where they could edit such a thing and then they take it to a person's wife or a person's business, or they leak this into an email where it could tarnish or damage a reputation of a person, because people are not so clued up into some of these things, except for the new generation that will understand that, as the previous speaker said on Skype, that it will take a lot of understanding to see that the movement, the language, the mouth. But once something comes into media, social media, on Instagram or on Twitter, people look at it as authentic, only to find that a person will be damaged by the time we get to know the truth. And some people might not even have to go back to it and say, no, it was him or it was not him. It's gospel. That's it. So it is very dangerous. We're moving towards the times where, as you said earlier, Peter, that people might think that we're here while we're not here due to the technology. So it is dangerous to our profession in the media, because people will edit things and then they splash it out. So the viewers won't even get an opportunity to verify whether it's true or not. So it is a problem.
All right, so Tebogo, I mean, what it suggests is that this is both an opportunity and a threat for journalism, so that the opportunity is we want sources that we can trust. And this is where media houses can now step up, establish trust, and always get it right. And so that people will now sort of wade through all the rubbish and say, but what does the SABC say? If it's on the SABC, it's true. What does the ENCA say? If it's true, if it's there, it must be true. That's the opportunity. But the threat, of course, is journalists looking at this stuff, treating it as real, and incorporating it into their stories.
And as they say, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it. I look at it very broadly in the context of the fourth industrial revolution, where we are seeing technological advances that do not involve human intervention or much human intervention. And we have to look at it in two contexts. Yes, we're excited at the opportunities, but we should also look at the ethical considerations of all of these technological advances. And I don't see somebody using a fake video of you for a positive purpose.
Yeah.
Why don't they just use the real perspective from you, exactly what you said? Why do they have to manipulate it? So I don't see many positives coming out of deep fakes. And I think that moving forward, we need to see that regulation around that to ensure that these kind of apps, are not able to reach the wrong hands. I think moving forward also, we need to look at how is it that we are going to utilize these technologies to further improve and develop our society. I don't really believe that people will be able to sift through a real video and a fake video easily. Already, we are seeing some of our relationships with other African countries being compromised, where two drunk people in Hillbrow will have a fight, and then they'll say that there's xenophobic attacks, and then they'll take a war that happened in Burundi, and then add all of those images, and then it creates outrage in Nigeria. And the question is, once you've posted something, how do you know that when you post the real thing, the same person is going to see the real thing too? And so that is why we say that it's very difficult to repair a broken reputation.
So Joe, does the media have a duty and a responsibility now to help the public understand what's real and what's not real, as opposed to just leaving it out there and leaving it alone? So if there's a fake story on social media, must we step in and say, this is fake? I mean, we can't police, but if we don't, there is this danger that Tebogo is raising.
Pete, it's very difficult. Like the guest said, it takes 20 years to build a reputation, and then it only takes a short space of time to destroy someone. Yes, the media houses can assist, but as we said, sometimes you find that the agenda of that particular media house or particular publication, it's different from what is happening at that time. The image of somebody is being destroyed. And again, social media, they load every second. Every 15 seconds they're loading. For media houses like your Sunday Times can only put a story on Sunday. So the technology, the way it's so quick, it becomes difficult for the ordinary people to grasp what is correct and what is not correct. But the media houses can only assist it's also to step up to compete in that space, because it is very difficult to do a damage control, especially when something has already been said, it's already been done. Right. And like the previous speaker said,
I'm going to have to move us along because we're running out of time, but we'll pick up on the publications, the part of what you've just said. Right after this break, we'll start looking at those newspapers and see what's on the front pages. Some of it predictable. It's been running for a couple of weeks already. SARS Rogue Unit, for example. We'll discuss those after this. Right, so welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Let's now take a turn and focus our attention on the newspapers and the front pages and what they're saying. Let's start in Durban with you, Joe. Which paper has grabbed your attention this morning?
It's a Sunday Times. They are talking about the man that has been exposed, Keletso Manyike, whom it has been said that has been the source behind the Public Protector's report. That's something that caught my eyes, and
because the paper is saying that he was a specialist agent for SARS, and that she was using him, but he seems to be completely mystified that he could be named in this way.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting time where I think the minister will be trying by all means to discredit what the Public Protector has found. So looking at these headlines and you're reading into the story, we yet to see what will develop this week, so we can see and also get the other side of the story, because since the report came out, we've been seeing this tussle back and forth between the Public Protector and the minister.
And this is an issue that's a concern to senior officials in South Africa's Chapter 9 world and government world, going at each other like this. The public are busy sitting and they're being caught in this war. We've just heard that the ANC Veterans League is backing Pravin Gordhan in this battle. So it starts to muddy the waters a little bit. And so when we read articles like this, there are some people who say it's fake news, and some people will say it's proof. It's a difficult situation.
Yeah, I think that only time will tell what is the truth. Eventually, we're going to find out what are the hidden issues that we perhaps are not privy to currently. It is not a good thing to see some of our institutions go at each other like this, because it's not just individuals. Pravin Gordhan represents an institution. The Public Protector represents an institution. But I think if we're going to follow the Constitution, for now we have to respect the decision of Parliament to appoint the Public Protector. We have to respect the decision of the President to appoint Pravin Gordhan. And I guess it's only a matter of time when we will see the truth.
Courts will be busy, hey?
Yeah.
So what grabbed your attention, also in the Sunday Times?
It's this story on the front page of the Sunday Times, which is
this is
headlined
the business
section. Hefty bill to fix up Steinhoff. Steinhoff has spent 1.2 billion rands in the space of 6 months on advisors.
Wow.
And this is to get a bounce back after the 90% share price was wiped off on this organization, which is owned in part by government through the PIC. And I think they've seen some improvements where Pepkor, its headline earnings have increased by 3%, which is an organization which was sold by Christo Weyser to Steinhoff. And I think it is in all of our best interest for Steinhoff to bounce back. But I guess the lesson here is that we need to look into how do we fund institutions, what is the selection criteria, so that we can get the best bang for our buck. And maybe even looking into how can we found startups and innovative organizations so that we can grow our economy.
Okay, all right, let's go to Durban. Joe, I'm going to ask you about a story actually on the front page of the City Press, which for me sort of, I wondered if it could possibly be true. And this is the Department of Arts and Culture Golden Mzansi economy, where they were funding cultural projects. And if it's to be believed, do you think that 36 million rand in 3 years is a fair amount to teach Zulu song and dance by Ladysmith Black Mambazo?
Sure. Look, we have a lot of artists that, in my view, we could have split the money and share with the up-and-coming artists, especially in this province. There's a lot of talent. It's very rich with a lot of things that are not being taken care of. We have Durban Arts House that has collapsed. So we're not saying that they should not have been given, but I'm saying that we have other up and coming artists that they could have been beneficiaries of that same amount of money that would have been split to ensure that there's a sustainability in the art fraternity.
All right, so what do we do? I mean, I suppose this is also part of the era where governance wasn't always at its best, so perhaps people might be quick to believe, or there might be some justification for spending this kind of amount. We don't know the full story, maybe.
Yeah, I think that if you look at the arts that I'm very passionate about, artists do require a lot of funding. We've heard various stories around artists who died paupers. Mahlatini is one example. And we need to see a situation where our artists are supported. So I do think Mzansi Golden Economy is a great idea, where you are able to cut, some funds for artists to develop. And I think the direction that should be taken is the development from the grassroots areas, and seeing how you could mentor artists in the rural areas and the townships.
I foresee another inquiry here. Speaking of which, Joe, what do you see as big news this week? I suppose all eyes on state capture and one former president.
I think it will be very interesting to finally get the former president to speak, and he's been given an opportunity to speak, to correct certain things, to also tell us things that he might have known about other people. As he always said, that when he is retired, he's going to write a book about certain things. Maybe this will be the start at the state capture inquiry, where you will start telling us certain things that have been happening in the background, as we were talking about, that there were certain things that were allowed to know, there were certain things that were not allowed to know. So the fact that he will be on the stand, it will be very interesting. I think he's one person that almost all of us or everyone has been waiting to hear him speak. Finally.
I suspect this isn't actually just a South African media event. This is going to be watched by the whole world. People have been curious about the state capture project. The president's name has been brought into that, and now we're going to hear it for the first time. Do you think he's going to say anything explosive?
Well, I don't think he'll say anything explosive. I'm interested in knowing what language he's going to testify in, because he might do it in isiZulu. It might take some time, but I think he got good legal advice to say that he needs to cooperate with the state capture inquiry, because if it does end up in the court of law, then it works in his advantage to say, no, but I cooperated. I was there to answer questions.
And the challenge here is that what he says here is under oath now, and so it could be a problem if he's not 100% with the truth. Gentlemen, I'm going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, but thank you so much indeed. Joe Mhlanga in Durban, thank you so much for joining us. And Tebogo Disego, Mr. Vice President of PISA, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
All right, and you at home, thank you so much for tuning in and watching Media Monitor this week. We hope that you enjoyed the program as much as we did. Join us again next week at the same time, and don't forget you can get hold of us on Twitter at SA Media Monitor and hashtag SABC Media Monitor. We want to hear what your thoughts are on the things that you see and hear on the program. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.